welcome to our first leaders brief contestant, in a sense, Phil Legg. So just to give a bit of background, I think it's really important for us, I think, as an organisation to really talk to sector leaders and sector professionals and people who are really making a positive impact within the cybersecurity profession. So just to give some background around how I've kind of when I met Phil. So I was at an event in Manchester run by NCSC with the Academic Centres of Excellence in Cybersecurity. Phil was there and talking about his work, and I was very impressed around, I think, the approach that Phil and his team are taking in the University of Bristol, or University of West England, Bristol, and the work they're basically doing there. So I thought it would be really good to kind of share that wider with obviously the wider network. So just to say to colleagues, obviously in the contents on your right hand side, if you've got any questions for Phil or questions you'd like me to ask Phil, do put them in the comments. Lisa will be then sharing them with Phil and I, and hopefully we'll get through some of these questions. This is very informal, very relaxed. Do like to, obviously I'm in a shirt and tie. Phil's in a suit, no tie. So we're trying to get the balance right. So hopefully everyone kind of enjoys the session. So just to start off with, nice and easy, Phil. So tell us about you, Phil. So who was Phil Legg?
Okay, thanks, Simon. And thank you, everyone, for joining today. So I'm Phil Legg. I'm Professor of Cybersecurity at the University of West of England. I look after our Academic Centre of Excellence in Cybersecurity Education, which is supported by the National Cybersecurity Centre. I also look after our programme on the MSc Cybersecurity. So who is Phil Legg then? Really good question. So I suppose Phil Legg's a bit of a geek. He's always enjoyed computers. From when I was really young, playing around with BBC microcomputers and all the rest of it, copying out code listings from the back of magazines, all the way through to making my own websites, playing around with JavaScript effects and all these kind of things. And really, computing's always been that thing that, it's been the hobby on the side. And It was really then about, well, how do I find a way to make that hobby my career, my passion? And so, I've gone on, I've done computer science at university and, developed this academic career, being able to actually conduct research and study in computer science, cybersecurity remit. And that's what got me here today, really.
Right. And when that initial excitement, what age are we talking about? Primary school, secondary school? That initial interest.
We're talking about 5 years old, being put in front of a BBC Micro when my parents were, thinking, "Oh, this child's screaming. What do we do with him? Give him a computer to play with." And I think back in the 80s, if you like, when it was really, really quite common to code up from scratch, to, as I say, copy out code listings, and there's that real kind of maker buzz, if you like, around coding. And what I love to see is some of that coming back nowadays with things like the Raspberry Pi initiatives and the like. How do we get kids excited about coding?
Absolutely. And in relation to your parents, any of your parents similar background around computing, data analysis, or not at all?
So good question. My family are all teachers. So my parents, my siblings, all teachers. And I actually spent a large part of my younger days saying, I don't really want to follow the profession. I don't want to be a teacher. I want to go off and play with computers. And then, it was kind of an epiphany at university, if you like, where I was actually able to see people who were teaching about computing, but saying, well, actually, I'm doing these projects on the side as well. And that's really what got me interested to say, well, actually, yeah, I can do the teaching and I love doing the teaching. And I'm also able to say, well, what about all these other projects that I'm involved with, and bring that into the teaching as well?
Right. Okay. So talk to me about your options in year 9. So what options did you choose? Because I really want to see this journey through. So now I know from 5 years old and all the things you're involved in, and the back pages, looking at the coding. So year 9 in your school, you chose your options. What options did you choose? If you can remember.
Yeah. Okay. So when I was choosing GCSEs, so I chose IT. We did ICT back then. So no computer science or anything was offered by my school. I did music. I remember I did music GCSE. Business studies. That's the other one. Okay. So yeah, IT, music, and business studies.
Okay.
And that's the thing. Then at A level, I went on, I did maths, I
Right.
did drama, and I did business studies again. And I never actually
Right.
did computer science or IT as an A level. But that's the
Right.
thing, it's one of those subjects which to me it was always that hobby, and it was how do I turn that hobby into a career path? But that what I was finding at the time, and again, this is something I'm really glad to see changing in the sector,
Yeah.
is that at the time, what the school's curriculum was looking like didn't really address what I felt I wanted to see.
Right.
So again, as a centre of excellence in education, one of the pieces we're really keen on is outreach and working with schools to make sure that they are actually getting those things that they need in terms of inspiring students into this profession.
Right. Okay. And then university, what course?
So I did computer science at Cardiff
Right.
Uni.
Right. Okay. So degree. Did you go on to a master's, then PhD? Take us through that route and
Yeah,
what
go on. Okay,
subject?
so
The whole journey.
the
Don't want to
whole
leave
journey.
anything out.
So I did computer science at Cardiff
Yep.
University, and it was in my last term when one of my academics basically said, "Look, I've got a PhD opportunity going. It's in this area. Is anyone interested?" And I'd really enjoyed the module that was being taught, so I went along and I had a conversation, and one thing led to another. I applied for the post, and this is actually quite interesting because at the time that was working with computer vision, and this was looking at medical imaging.
Right.
And so my PhD is all based around how do we use machine learning techniques, computer vision techniques to help in terms of medical diagnosis and early prevention of blindness. And then from there, I basically followed a kind of a typical academic career, if you will, working as a postdoc before a lectureship. And my postdocs took me on a bit of a journey from using computer vision techniques, machine learning techniques, to actually being able to apply that in sports science. So being able to look at player movement on a rugby pitch, being able to analyze sports data, and being able to bring in visualization techniques for understanding this information better. And it was actually then the combination of those which led me into cybersecurity. So it was bringing machine learning techniques, visualization techniques into a cybersecurity project that I worked on with the University of Oxford and CPNI. And this was essentially bringing together those skills to be able to say, well, how do we use that for recognizing cybersecurity issues? And in particular, how do we use that for recognizing insider threat? So this was about trying to understand from a wealth of data, how can I identify those cases where somebody may actually be trying to hide their behaviors, but how do we tease that out? And how do we actually be able to piece together what people are doing in organizations and how that might be affecting security postures?
Right. Excellent. See, it's always interesting. You see, going through the history, everything from primary school, secondary options, GCSEs, all the way through. Then you really get the background to the individual and the story. So now it all makes sense. In your response there, I think, Phil, you also obviously mentioned around the university and your obvious position around the as an academic centre of excellence in relation to cybersecurity. What does that mean to you? And tell so people who are not aware of what that is, can you kind of explain it to the delegates, please?
Okay, sure. So as I say, we are an academic centre of excellence in cybersecurity education. So this is a recognition put out by the National Cybersecurity Centre. Their first round of recognitions was December 2020, where we were one of only 7 gold institutions across the country. So what this means, it means that we've got a certified degree by NCSC. So we're teaching our students about cybersecurity. But it also means that we're going above and beyond there. So not just thinking about our own students in our own departments, but actually how do we teach all students about cybersecurity? Because this is not something where we can say, well, these students know about cybersecurity, but the rest of them don't need to. This is something that everyone in society needs to at least be acknowledging. Okay, so it's about the work we do across the university, upskilling students in business, in law, in psychology, and it's also how we work with the academics in those teams to understand the kind of multifaceted problem that cybersecurity actually is. And then there's other aspects of this where we work very closely with our information security team in the organization. So thinking not just are we teaching good cybersecurity, but are we actually delivering on that? And as an institution and as a business, are we upholding what we're teaching? And then the final point really is about what are we doing in the community? So I've mentioned a bit about outreach already. So it's about working with schools, community groups, maybe the vulnerable in the region, trying to help all of them understand, what are we talking about when we mean cybersecurity? How do we look after personal cybersecurity? But also, how do we make people think about the career paths into cybersecurity? So trying to bring all of those dots together and link it up. I mean, the thing I always think is, it's no good if we say, oh, well, the Southwest, we've got it covered. We've got cybersecurity, but forget about the rest of the UK. It's going to take a joined up approach because, we've got to strengthen the entire nation, if not actually, the entire planet, really.
Yeah, 100%. Excellent. And are there other levels in really, because you're obviously gold standard, are there other levels in relation to ACE?
Yeah, absolutely. So they do offer a silver and a gold, and so it's essentially, are you aspiring to be this, or are you already delivering on this? So I mean, as an institution, we've been doing a lot in security for many years now. Our undergraduate program has been running since kind of late 90s, early noughties. Our master's program came in 2018 and was certified by NCSC back then. But as I say, over time, as the institution's grown, and certainly as our department's grown, we've brought in a lot of new researchers, a lot of new academics working around this problem space.
Right. And so it's interesting how you kind of link that back to the other departments and their kind of engagement, and how you kind of showcasing cybersecurity in other departments. How did you get them to engage? Because very often, different departments sometimes work in silos. What's been the success? How have you been able to achieve that?
It's really about trying to find those silos of excellent activity going on and bringing them together. And I mean, it's quite often the case in large organizations. You'll find, there's this person over here doing this fantastic work, but how do we link those dots? Now, for us, actually, cybersecurity is multifaceted, as I say. There's no getting away from that. Now, we can only do so much as a computer science department, and obviously we approach it from more of the technical aspects. But, you start talking to colleagues in the Faculty of Business and Law, and they'll be talking about law and regulation. They'll be talking about operational practice. They'll be talking about all the things from the organizational aspects, which cybersecurity is crucial to. You start talking to people in criminology and psychology, trying to understand, well, what are the motives for someone, a hacker or hacktivist or an insider threat or whoever it may be. But what are their motives? What's making them tick, and what's making them cause that threat? So, we've been able to tease out these pockets of where activity is happening and bring it all together to say, well, look, this is the picture of cybersecurity and cybercrime across the institution.
Excellent. And the facilitators of those units, are they from the cybersecurity department, or do you train the current lecturers who then deliver in their units?
So in terms of those different areas, so as I say, I mean, I'm based in computer science. I work with colleagues in the business school who would have their own teams in those departments and those faculties. So it's very much finding the people across the institution who are doing work which is related. And I think, just as a really interesting aside there, because what we've found is there's a number of people doing work, whether it be, say, international relations, or whether it be business continuity planning, or be it, other aspects, where when you speak to them, they'll say, oh, yeah, this is what I do, but I don't do cybersecurity. And actually, that starts a conversation with them, because we say to them, well, actually, you do cybersecurity, because, if you're thinking about how to ensure that a business can keep running, well, cyber is a key part of that. And, yes, the cyber is that enabler to be able to do business, but it's also that vulnerability, and that, you're opening that attack surface. So I think what's been interesting in recent years is having those conversations with people who don't necessarily understand or even want to understand the technology aspects,
Yep.
Because that's just not the thing that they're interested in as such. But actually, when you put it in terms of, you know, a lot of organizations, if not all, are essential relying on digital technology that is underpinning a lot of their activity, and therefore cybersecurity is a natural part of that. So I think that's been a really interesting conversation to have with staff.
Excellent. And again, in relation to university and your specific courses, Phil, tell us about your student cohort, you know, national, international backgrounds, etc.
Okay, yeah. So in terms of our courses, I mean, in our undergraduates, we've seen great numbers increasing over the years, in terms of students really interested to sign up to do our undergraduate course. One thing to say about our undergraduate course is that it's not just straight cybersecurity, it's actually cybersecurity and digital forensics. So this is not just thinking about how do I secure computer systems, but this is also thinking about, if there's been an incident, how do I retrieve evidence from that that can be put forward in a court of law, and how can I have proper evidential process taking place for that? So one of the things about our undergraduates is that actually a lot of them start to then really enjoy that digital forensics piece and look towards law enforcement, for instance, as their career paths. In terms of our masters is a straight cybersecurity course. And again, I mean, what's interesting about the masters is that unlike a bachelor's where, you know, many of the students are school leavers or maybe a couple of years after school, whereas the masters is far and wide. You know, we've had people of all backgrounds come into the program. We've had people who are kind of mid-career changing roles from completely different industries. We've had people from late career who just say, well, actually, I'm just really interested in this stuff. So, and I mean, also, what's really interesting is when you start looking at the full-time and the part-time as well. The roles that people are doing alongside this, we've got people who've been working for large corporations across the country, for government organizations across the country, and they're saying, oh yeah, I'm either working in this field and I want to upskill myself, or I'm working in a completely different department and I quite fancy transitioning in. So there's a real mix of our cohort. And I suppose just the last thing to add on there is the international market as well. In particular for our master's program, the international market is really popular. A lot has changed over the last couple of years for many institutions in terms of the post-study work visa, which has meant that it's essentially more appealing for international students to come to the UK to study. And so that really has opened the doors to them. And, you know, we've seen a fantastic uptake, which is great to see.
And any particular countries where you're getting that really good intake from?
Okay, so we get a lot of students coming to us from Africa. We get a lot of students coming to us from India. We do get quite a couple from kind of China and Asia regions. But yeah, I'd say Africa and India are probably our two main hotspots.
Okay, excellent. Now, thanks for that, Phil. So take us through then, Phil. Take us through a normal kind of day or week in the life of Phil Legg.
Oh gosh, a normal day or week.
Or typical. And sometimes it's not normal because interested in what that looks like.
I mean, it's a really tough question to answer, actually. As an academic, I mean, my role is covering many different things. You know, I might be teaching. I might be teaching a module. So some of the modules I teach are things like cybersecurity analytics. I teach security data visualization. And this is really about, you know, how do I bring those skills of machine learning visualization into the cybersecurity domain, whether that be doing malware analysis, whether it be doing network traffic analysis, fake news detection on social media platforms. You know, the list goes on. So there might be some teaching involved. And I guess in more recent years, that teaching could be on campus. We've actually been running things online boot camps as well, with partners such as the Institute of Coding. So actually some of our teaching has been delivered online, which has worked really well for students who want to be able to take us up on what we're offering, but may not necessarily be within the region. Other things, I mean, you catch me in the middle of May, which is marking season. So there's a lot of marking and a lot of assignments coming in at the moment. But then there's the research aspects as well. I mean, I'm quite passionate about research and how we build that kind of research culture around cybersecurity. So I have a number of PhD students who work with SMEs across our region, looking at things like defense security, looking at telecom security. So there might be a couple of meetings with them, finding out, what kind of investigations and problems have they been coming up against. And actually, the thing for me is always being able to get hands-on and doing the techie stuff. I love the teaching, I love the talking, but actually, put me in front of a computer and let me do some coding. So, one of the things which, as time goes on, I find less and less hours in the day to do, but nevertheless, something I love still. And it's a real mix there. It's about the teaching, it's about the research, it's about how are we reaching out to the community. So just as a final example for this point, recently we were running workshops with school teachers. So we had school teachers from across the West of England region coming to us every Monday afternoon. So we were fortunate enough to have funding from the NCSC to actually support their time. So actually have supply teachers covering their time so they could step away, join us on site. And actually, it wasn't just a conventional workshop. This was very much them coming along saying, oh, I'd really love to know an example of how I can teach this or how I can teach that. Okay. And us having to think on our feet a little bit and say, okay, well, what would a practical exercise look for that? So one of the things we created off the back of that was essentially a very portable Raspberry Pi cyber range where this can be used by school teachers. It doesn't have any impact on the school network, which we know is an obstacle for some of these things. And it, more to the point, it was about upskilling those teachers, not to say, here, let me come in and deliver a session and, you sit and watch, but actually saying to the teachers, well, look, you muck into, I want you to be able to learn how to deliver this session and give them the confidence. If they've got the confidence to deliver that session, they take ownership of that idea. They're going to be much more infused about it.
Absolutely. Is that something? Obviously, you've obviously worked in the obviously West of England. Is that something that can be shared wider, or you'd be willing to do training with, if I'm engaged with a multi-academy trust and they're going to take out some of their teachers? Is that something we could have a further conversation on, or that you could basically share wider?
Absolutely. So actually, this is something which I've made available on my website. So if you're interested, hopefully somewhere up here you can see my email address as well, so please do reach out. So it is available online. One other thing to add in is, so I'm a co-founder of an initiative called CISI UK, and this is all about how do we bring a better network of educators in cybersecurity. So I work very closely with colleagues in London, colleagues in Scotland, trying to join up the dots of, oh, well, what's happening in your institution, what's happening here, and so that we're not repeating it ourselves over and over. We want to be able to share and collaborate. And so it's a really interesting point you raised, because actually this is something which, if there are regions across the UK saying, well, we want to get involved, but we don't know how to, then actually, the CISI UK network is one which might be able to help there. But fundamentally, as I mentioned earlier, this is stuff we're trying to put out for the greater good of all.
Absolutely. And do share that information with us, Phil, and we'll make sure that obviously all our members are obviously aware of that and those kind of opportunities and how to basically engage with yourself. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Just to say, for again, all the delegates are on the chat on the webinar watching. If you've got any questions, do put them into your comments box on the right hand side, and then Lisa will share them with ourselves, and then I'll pose them to Phil, and I'm sure Phil will be able to answer. But while we're waiting for that, I will carry on with some of the questions I've based. My pre-prepared questions. It's half pre-prepared, but also some, because I wanted to make sure we had the right questions, because I wanted to pin down Phil on a few. This is an interesting one. As you know, back in January, DCMS released a consultation on kind of standards and pathways, and I'd call it, whether the sector should be regulated. Interested in your view, and what do you think the outcome? Well, obviously we won't get the results until June, so next month. What do you think the potential outcome of that could be, but also or your view of the consultation?
Yeah, it's a tough one, that is. I mean, in terms of pathways, there's obviously been a lot of focus on cybersecurity pathways. How do people get into cybersecurity? And we hear it day in, day out, the kind of barriers that people come up against, where you've got entry-level roles being posted and they say, oh yeah, you've got to have 3 years experience to get it. And you kind of think, well, hold on, there's a slight mismatch there, isn't there? So how do we have these pathways in place? And I guess also another challenge to the idea of pathways is that actually, I suspect if you spoke to most people, say 35 plus, working in cybersecurity, and you say to them, okay, so what was your pathway? They'd probably tell a story, well, probably not necessarily quite as diverse as mine, but they wouldn't be able to say, oh, well, from the age of 12, I knew what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And I think that's the challenge we're up against, because, none of us have lived and breathed that idea of having a pathway straight from the off.
Yeah.
So I think there will always be that element of, having those conversations, putting yourself out there, having those conversations with people about what you're up to, what you enjoy doing. And, who knows where that conversation might lead you to. It might be someone saying, I know of this great job going, let me link you up. Next thing you know, you've got it. Yeah. So I think pathways are a really good idea, because I think, having said all that, it's too easy for me to be able to sit back and say to students, oh, well, don't worry about a pathway, because, an opportunity will just land on your plate at some point. Yeah. That doesn't really sit right with me as advice, even though that may well be what ends up happening. Yeah. So we have got to think about pathways, and we've got to think, not necessarily saying, from the age of year 8 onwards, this is the pathway and no other path may exist. That's not what it's about. But it is about just giving open, making people aware of the opportunities that are out there.
Absolutely.
And I think the work that the council has done around identifying those 16 job areas and saying, well, look, what do you need to know in order to be able to be a SOC analyst, or go into governance, risk and compliance? And I think that's really, really valuable. Yeah. And I think the other thing I'd say to it is, what I would say to a student is, if they're saying, oh, well, I've seen this job advert for a security consultant, or I've seen this job for a security analyst, I say to them, okay, but what does that mean? What are you actually doing in that job? And getting them to think not about job titles, but actually, what do they want to spend their 9 to 5 doing? If they say, oh, yeah, I love getting my hands dirty with data and investigating that data, then, maybe the SOC analyst role is for them. Yeah. But if they think, well, actually, I love thinking about how different parts of an organization fit together, then maybe that governance and risk part is a better fit for them. So I think it's getting them thinking about what it is they want to be doing each day, rather than what the job title is that they're heading toward.
Absolutely. And that really links very much to, as I've said a few times, I've had quite a few people who obviously connect on LinkedIn or come for our inquiries at the council, who sometimes have degrees or masters, but they can't, from their view, can't secure a job. And so they really then ask the questions, well, how can I secure, how can I get into the profession if I've got these qualifications, but no one's giving me opportunity, especially if you need some years experience and I'm basically a graduate. So what advice or tips would you give to someone who's, yes, may have a qualification, degree or master's, it may have had units of cybersecurity in it, but it's not fully kind of a purist cybersecurity, but really want to get into profession? What advice or guidance? Because some are quite frustrated, because I get quite a lot of traffic really just posing this question.
Yeah, I mean, I think it really is a challenge, and I think the best advice I can always give students is, how are you going to make yourself stand above the crowd? Okay, how are you going to put out a portfolio to say, well, this is who I am and this is what I do? I mean, if I hark back to my own career path, when that PhD opportunity came up for me, I thought I was, it was a way of being able to say, oh, well, everyone else I know would be a junior software developer, and if I went off and did this thing, I'd be a senior software developer, and it would help me stand above the crowd. And what I actually found was, rather than putting me higher up that ladder, it just presented a whole bunch of other ladders. So I'd never considered that academic career path until that moment. But I think it all comes down to how can you put yourself out there and at least say, look, this is who I am, this is what I do. And then obviously that's a hiring manager question to take it or leave it, I guess, at that point. But having an online portfolio, being able to not just say, oh yeah, I've done a bit on Try Hack Me or Hackerbox, and I've done this degree, but not really saying it much about it.
Yeah.
You've got to be able to elaborate on that and say, well, okay, yeah, so you did a master's in cybersecurity, but what did you actually learn on that master's? Again, if you think about, well, my own program, but also the programs up and down the country, there are a lot of universities offering cybersecurity degrees, but they all look different. So being able to actually spell out, well, this is what I learned on this particular one, and this is why it's useful to me. That's key. So I think having a portfolio where you actually share what you're up to, what you've been doing. Videos, another great way of being able to do that. So actually, for a lot of my students, I have assignments where I say, look, make a video, put it on YouTube. But I also say to them, you're not making the video for me and the assignment. You're making that video so that you've got something long lasting. But actually, when an employer says to you, oh, so tell me about that cybersecurity analytics module you did, you can say to them, well, look, there's a 10-minute video on YouTube. Do you want to just watch it? And actually being able to illustrate things like that. And I think the other thing that's really important to say is, as I say, there are so many job adverts that are posted nowadays where it's frustrating because, as I say, we see this entry-level role, entry-level pay. Oh, but we expect you to have, this many years experience and all these certifications and everything else. Now, as a new graduate, you've got to step back a little bit and think, well, is that the organization that I want to work for then? Because if they're expecting me to have all of this stuff, but actually, they're still calling me junior, then do they understand the job? Because I mean, and I've spoken to students about this very problem who have found themselves in it, where actually they've got a job and they've almost regretted having got it because they suddenly become the fall guy for all security problems in the organization, because it turns out they've been recruited to a team of one. So I think it's really it's a minefield out there. There's no denying that. But I think all you can do is publicize yourself, market yourself in the best way possible, and just keep an eye on what's coming up in the hope that the right thing does come your way.
Yeah, perfect. And I see some questions coming through. So I think the first one we've got is from Andrew Jones. Thank you very much, Andrew, for your question. And what it basically says, so, but much like educators, how do we get the right hiring managers? It links very much to what you're saying there, Phil. The right hiring managers to identify what business. Oh, thank you very much, Lisa, for putting it up there. All the technology is working perfectly. Okay, thank you, Andrew Jones. So, but much like educators, how do we get the hiring managers to identify what the business actually needs and how they produce internal development plans to ensure they have steady growth in workforce competency? Very good question, Andrew. Thanks very much. Thanks, Lisa.
Yeah, very good question. Again, I mean, I guess it comes back to that point of do they understand? Do they understand security and what they're trying to achieve? And some, of course, the answer is yes, and some the answer is, well, perhaps not. And so whether they've got an existing IT division or whatever it might be, to be able to just pull those that kind of understanding from others to say, well, look, does this seem reasonable? Rather than saying, I've put this job spec together because this is what I see other organizations doing, and actually having the conversations internally to work out, well, what do we need to fit our organization? And that's going to be very individual basis, isn't it? So, but then I think, one of the things that I think's been great with my time at UWE is actually, if I think about the undergraduate program, over time, we've seen students going year on, year out to the same places. So actually, they have themselves been identifying, well, this is where our talent pipeline can come from. So classic example for me is CGI. A lot of the students I teach on the security analytics courses, find themselves going to CGI, starting off in SOC roles, then working through threat intelligence and other related areas. And they actually, I've had student alumni come back and say, actually, you know, that was the module that helped give me the confidence to go off and do that pathway. And so, you know, they'll be sent back to us to give a tour, basically, to try and get more of them. So I guess to bring it back to the question, it's linking up where are those pipelines with what's happening in institutions like UWE, I guess.
Excellent. Yeah, excellent. Thanks for that, Phil. Thanks for your question, Andrew. We've got another question from Gordon Robinson. Thank you, Gordon. So should IT and OT cybersecurity have different learning paths, observing legacy equipment and health and safety issues? Your views, Phil. Thanks for the question, Gordon.
Okay. Should they have different learning paths? Well, so one of the things we offer at UWE on our MSc, we actually have a module which is called Critical System Security, and it's all about operational technology. It's all about OT. Because you're absolutely right. You know, when you're talking about industrial control systems, critical national infrastructure, we're talking about things like Modbus, and we're talking about different protocols and different operational needs. You know, you can't just say, oh, you know, it's playing up a little bit, let's switch it off and on again, when it's actually controlling a nation's power supply or a nation's oil and gas sector. So you're absolutely right. We need to be thinking about those problems in different ways. So whether it becomes a different learning path, I mean, for us, we have it as one module within our wider MSc. Kind of as I was alluding to earlier, there'll be other MSc programs up and down the country where they say, yep, that's our core focus, or no, we're not about OT, but we'll do plenty on the IT. So I think different institutions will, well, may or may not choose to address it. And that really comes down to the expertise they have in-house. You know, our program was designed around the academics we have in our team.
Okay, excellent. There's more questions, but before we go on to that, thanks so much for your question there, Gordon. In relation to CyBOK and that mapping work that they've basically been doing, could you just, I think, explain to delegates just around that mapping program? I might invite AWAS to one of our future leaders briefs to really talk about that in detail, but especially in relation to the mapping and that kind of mapping work. Can you just explain what that is, Phil?
Absolutely. So as part of the NCSC certification process, we as an institution have to map our programs against the CyBOK. The CyBOK, for those who may not be familiar with this, is the cybersecurity body of knowledge. And this encompasses, well, they've updated it recently, is it about 20 or 21 knowledge areas now, painting the picture of all of the different areas that touch cybersecurity. Because, I mean, that's the thing, as a term, cybersecurity, so often people think, well, what are we talking about here? Because if we're talking about computer security, should we not just call it computer security? Or if we're talking about information assurance, well, again, should we not just call it that? But then when you start thinking about, well, you know, where does social engineering fit with all of this? Where does law and regulation and data protection, data privacy fit with all of this? This is why the CyBOK came about, to be able to map out, well, you know, when we talk about cybersecurity, what are these different areas? And so it works through different aspects such as hardware security, infrastructure, software, through to human and regulatory aspects, and through to attacks and defenses. So it gives a really nice grouping of different areas. And for me as an academic, I mean, what it's trying to do is, as the name suggests, paint that body of knowledge, be able to say, well, look, this is what the literature says on this particular topic. It's not necessarily trying to say, here's all the new things coming down the line. That's not what it's trying to do, but it is trying to essentially collate that so that anyone saying, oh, well, now I'm interested in malware and attack technologies. How do I find out about that? Well, the CyBOK could be the place to refer to. And so for us, working with NCSC, and the CyBOK project is sponsored by NCSC, we have to map our program to the CyBOK to be able to say, well, what areas of the CyBOK are we covering? Because, you know, we cannot cover everything. Okay, the CyBOK has, as I say, 21 knowledge areas. It would be wrong of us to claim that we are doing, you know, loads of stuff in all of those areas. But it does allow us to identify the key points. So I've mentioned already one of our flagship modules is critical system security.
Yeah.
And the SciBoc has a knowledge area on cyber physical systems, which is all about industrial control systems and the like. So we're able to say, well, actually, yeah, that's one of the key areas of our program. Other things that stand out, we have modules on information risk management. So we've got a stronger weighting on that, a stronger weighting on network security and malware, because these come in different modules. And I think, what's been really nice about this as it's gone over years is as more and more programs do go for that NCSE certification and they have this requirement to do this mapping process, what it means for a student is that they can actually look at these programs and say, well, how does this place compare to that place? If I'm a student wanting to study cybersecurity and I'm really interested in human aspects of cybersecurity, where is it that's teaching that?
Absolutely.
I'd say to them, right, well, there are great places up and down the country based on how they've mapped their program to the SciBoc.
Absolutely. Yeah, perfect. Absolutely spot on, Phil. And I think, answering the question around where, what university should I attend because I'm interested in a particular area, understanding what's a specific, as you said, you don't cover all of the 21 areas, but you know where your strengths are. And so students attend the university knowing exactly what they're going to get out of that and what kind of roles they can go into. I think it's absolutely essential. So I would, shout a plea out to any trainers, any certification bodies, and the universities to contact the SciBoc team and to put your course, your training program, etc., through that mapping process. And because really, it helps you as an organization and institution, but also it helps students and future students to understand exactly what the strengths are of your particular course. I think that's really important. So thanks for that, Phil. So great questions coming through. So we've got a question from Adriana Costa McFadden. Thank you very much, Adriana. Do you engage with industry for student placements, graduate jobs? And if so, how do you do it? Thank you, Adriana.
Okay, so yes, I mean, we've got a bunch of different initiatives with industry where we have industry speakers coming in giving talks. So we run our UE Cyber guest seminar series, which typically runs every week during our term time. And this is about bringing our postgraduate and undergraduate communities together to hear from industry. And what I always really like about this is, I mean, we get a wide range of speakers, as you may imagine, but quite often it's alumni. Like I mentioned earlier about one of the chaps working at CGI. This is a student who finished probably about 5-6 years ago with us, and actually having students like that come back, because what's really valuable there is not just hearing, oh, and I managed to land my first job, but actually you hear, and now I was able to progress, after 2 years of being, I got this role, and then I got onto this next role. So allowing the students to hear that story. And then they're often coming back because they're saying, well, actually, yes, we've got placement opportunities for students. We've got, graduate roles. And so it's very much tying in their promotion and, publicizing their company to our students. For our undergraduate students, we offer the kind of sandwich year where between second and final year, they can go off for a year and do an industry role. And we often support the students in finding those places. So we will draw on our own networks. We have the UE Cyber seminars that allow the students to explore that. And so, I would encourage all students to take that kind of placement where it's available to you. Finding those placements can be hard, understandably. But again, that is something which we will always support students on doing so.
Excellent. Thank you. Thanks for the question, Andrea. Thanks for that, Phil. Phil, do you have an extra 15 minutes, 10, 15, just to answer a few more questions?
Absolutely.
Because loads of good questions coming through, and I've got a few more just want to pose at the end. So hopefully, any delegates that need to jump off the call, absolutely fine. And thank you for participating. Those who can stay for extra 10, 15 minutes as we just finish off some of the additional questions, that would be super, because I think it's going really well. And, and before we finish, we're really interested as an organization on your feedback to how our session today, and how we can improve on that, and kind of topics or themes you'd like to cover in the future. So do think about that and put that in the chat, and Lisa will pick that up. So our next question is from Peter Fletcher. If you would like to pick that one up, Lisa, for me, please. Okay, so my concerns about educating in cybersecurity, especially in the technical roles, is that it focuses on the top level knowledge. Okay, so not the foundations of what top level skills relies upon. I've come from a background of networking and infrastructure before entering the cybersecurity, and I always fall back on my fundamental knowledge. Any views on how this can be managed in the education flow in industry, we are starting to see this knowledge, but a gap in know-how. Thanks so much for that question, Peter.
Yeah, that's a really good
Yeah,
question.
very good question.
I mean, one of the things that we would always say at UWE is, for us as a computer science department teaching cybersecurity, the computer science is critical, okay? And we do get students who come to us saying, oh, well, I didn't realize there'd be so much computer science. And I say to them, well, we're a computer science department, you know, and you've got to understand that computing aspect. So you're absolutely right. You know, when you're thinking about networking and infrastructure, what our biggest module on the MSc is a module called Computer and Network Security. And actually, it's quite a technical module. We have students who absolutely love it, and we have students who say, oh, I'm glad that one's over. But it's critical, you know. So absolutely. I think, you know, unless you understand, you know, well, networking, operating systems, programming languages. I mean, programming is a really interesting one because, again, so many of my students will say to me, oh, yeah, but, you know, why do I need to know programming? Because the job I look for, I don't want a job where I'm doing programming. And I say to them, that's not the point, no. You know, our master's is not set up to train you in one specific job. What we're trying to do, and this does kind of tie back to the cyborg, you know, what we're trying to do is say, well, actually, you know, these are the knowledge areas that we are addressing because they play to our expertise as academics. Then building upon that to say, well, you know, these are the skills that relate to those in terms of, you know, if I know about, you know, OSI stacks and TCP IP, whatever it might be, you know, how do I put that into practice? So one of the things we do on the computer network security module, you know, students will build a VPN from scratch, okay? Right. And this is really important because it's not just saying, oh yeah, I know how to download a VPN piece of software and, you know, run it. This is saying, well, how do I actually understand what's happening in terms of packets being transmitted across that secure network? So it's really important to have that underlying understanding of computer science that you build upon. So that, I mean, that's the philosophy that we kind of run with at UWE, because it's crucial, as you say.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks for that question, Peter. Okay, so our next question is from John Deere. Next question up, Lisa. If it's taking up too much, okay, that's not taking up too much of the space. I was only seeing your head sometimes there, Phil. Both our heads are bobbing about. Okay, thank you for the question, John. So what is your view of someone who is not followed an academic pathway but has years of experience as an IT professional? Should the lack of academic qualifications be a barrier to continue in cybersecurity? Excellent question, John. So many people ask this question. I look forward to your answer, Phil. Thanks, John.
A really good question. And I mean, the straightforward answer is no, it shouldn't be a barrier. I mean, at the end of the day, as I said earlier, everyone is going to take a different path, aren't they? You know, my path is just one of many. Now, yes, I followed an academic path, but that's because I currently work in academia. I don't work in industry and government. I work with them, but I don't hold an industry role. So for me, yes, I would follow the academic route. But, you know, when you've got industry crying out saying, well, look, you know, there's this skill shortage and we need more people and all the rest of it. Oh, but we're not going to take half of them. You kind of think, well, hold on, there's a mismatch there. Yeah. So absolutely. One of the things we've been running recently, and this has been a UK-wide initiative operated by the Institute of Coding, we've been running boot camps. And this is about how do you get people from other sectors, other areas, interested in cybersecurity. Now, you know, I'd be lying if I said, oh yeah, and that's going to get you the foothold in the door, you know, for that career path, because it's a short boot camp. But what it does do is it's very intense, very concentrated delivery of cybersecurity material to be able to build up that interest. And I guess then it comes back to how do you build up that portfolio to say, well, look, this is who I am and this is what I know, this is what I do. And then the last piece of that puzzle is finding those organizations who are willing to take a punt on that. Because I think, you know, as much as, you know, everyone says, oh, well, you know, in universities and like, we need to think about employability, how are we ensuring that students are getting roles in industry? There is a part to play of industry to say, well, look, you know, here's someone who, yeah, they might not meet all of these dream wishes that we had on our job spec, but are we going to take a punt on this person? And I think if we're going to address the skills gap that everyone talks about, yeah, we need to see more of that.
Absolutely, 100%. Thanks for your question there, John. Yeah, thanks for excellent answer. So our next question is Andrew Jones. If you could pop that one up, please, Lisa. Okay. Good question, Andrew. In the famine of skills, famine employers are looking for a ready cooked talent, absolutely, and see an investment in time and an effort to build the capacity, given the historical workplace model of a career in a business, as somewhat eroded over time. Some analysis shows that the median tenure for workers aged 25 to 35 is 2.5 years. Oh, okay, and 55 to 64 is 9.9 years. Okay. So any views on this, Phil? Thanks for your question, Andrew.
Yeah, so it's a very interesting one. I think I had a conversation with a student not too long ago who really impressed me. Actually, she was one of our MSc students. She'd studied our course. She'd gone on to work for a known organization in cybersecurity, let's say. And okay, this was during the pandemic and one thing another. But she really felt kind of lost and out on a limb in this role. And after about 6 months, she was in a new city to what she was familiar with and the like. And she said, this doesn't feel right. This doesn't sit right with me. But then the next time she was interviewing, she was saying to the companies, what's the training offer? And I think that's key. This whole idea that employers can say, oh, well, we want someone who's ready to go on day one. Well, day one in most of my jobs, I've been trying to work out, where the cafe is, where the toilets are, and my way to the office. So I think this idea of being able to say, well, you're good to go from day one is a little bit ambitious. But I think more importantly, it's that training offering. If you think about CPD and the like, employers should be investing in their people. They should be saying, well, actually, you come to us and we will put you through this training. We will help support you to where you want to get. So it comes back to what I was saying earlier, being able to see that potential in people. If you could see the potential, you could see how to mold them into that right role. I think what you've said about the tenure of workers is really interesting. We do see, a lot of our students going off and getting their first graduate job. And then, after 2 or 3 years, they say, oh, well, I've got a new role. Now, sometimes that is progression in the organization. So I think progression in cybersecurity can happen quite quickly from what we've seen with our students. But it's also giving them that time to think, well, like I said a minute ago with the other student, is this the right place for me? There are lots and lots of places to be working, So I think it's about finding the right fit for an individual. But training is critical. It doesn't stop with academia and education. It is lifelong, isn't it?
Absolutely, and I think it's really good points there, and I completely agree with what you're saying there, Andrew. I think the importance of where people say they want someone ready cooked, most are not, and you're absolutely right, Phil. You are looking for where is where's the restroom, where can I get a coffee? I want to have a conversation with my colleagues, and so it's really important that for employers to basically invest in obviously graduates and people who join an organization, but also to set the right culture. And it's a culture of inclusion and continual professional development. Because it's one thing having a whole agenda of I want more people to join the organization, but sometimes people don't stay if the culture and the tone and the behaviors are not right. So I think that's really important. So thanks again. Thanks for that, Phil, and thanks again for your question, Andrew. And I think our last question before winding down is from Becca DeVille. So when you are training teachers, do you cover online safety and teachers helping protect the school data from the students themselves? Very good question, Becca. Very good question indeed.
Yeah.
Phil.
So when we've been working with teachers, I mean, we've covered a whole range of things, and what we did with our recent workshops, actually, we didn't want to say to them, these are the topic areas we're going to teach you, because we were actually talking with teachers who they were teaching cybersecurity or computer science. So really, it was more for us to hear from them. Well, what are the things you want to learn from us? If you're going to put out 12 weeks of your time to come here, I don't want to then start with, well, let's go to the the fundamentals of cybersecurity and the introduction to the CIA triad and all of these things where they might say to me, yeah, I already know that. So yes, I mean, we we help support teachers with online safety, and thinking about, you know, school as a business and how do we protect that data. One of the projects which we run is a thing called Unlock Cyber, and this is all about, well, we work with year 8 students typically, but we actually bring 300 year 8 students onto campus each year for an annual taster day. It gives the students a taste of what the industry is about, the opportunities that are actually local to them as well, which is key there. But whilst the students are on site doing all of these cool activities and the like, we actually have the teachers there as well. And we often run sessions with the teachers there saying, well, you know, again, what are the challenges you're facing, whether it be, you know, how do I get the school even to think about online safety, or them as individuals, or the students?
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, excellent. Thanks for your question, Becca. So we've got 4 minutes left. So really, this is just an opportunity for yourself, Phil, just to, you know, anything you'd like to share with delegates that we obviously have online. And let me just move this 1 second. I think my computer's going into refresh mode, so I do apologise. I hope you didn't see that.
That's all
Yes.
right.
Anything you'd like to share with delegates, Phil?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, you know, just to say, well, first of all, thank you. If you're still on the call, thank you for sticking with us for so long. Hopefully, what we've been talking about has been interesting and insightful for you. As I say, at the University of West of England, we are, you know, working across the region. You know, our remit as an academic centre of excellence in cybersecurity education is really important to emphasise that we are regional. I'll always joke and say, well, look, you know, we are University of the West of England, so I want to cover that West of England region. I work quite closely with institutions in Gloucestershire. We work closely with Gloucestershire College and local schools, obviously GCHQ and NCSC, but we go all the way down to, you know, Bridgewater, Tiverton, you know, getting onto the edges of Devon and Cornwall. So we do try and cover that West of England region. So if there are people on the call who fall into that bracket, then definitely, you know, if there are ways we can work with you, whether it be outreach, schools, and industry, whatever, we're more than happy. But also, you know, we will work obviously outside of the region across the UK. You know, it comes back to that point I made earlier, that there's no point in me saying, well, you know, I want the Southwest to be secure, but I'll, you know, forget about everyone else. So if there's anyone on the call thinking, you know, I'd like to talk to Phil a bit more about how we can collaborate and work together, then I'm really interested to hear. We do a lot in terms of the outreach piece, but also in terms of research, industrial research and partnership. So anything you might be of interest to you, and how we can help you, then please do get in touch.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Phil. So, well, just to finish off, I think just by saying massive appreciation, Phil. You was our guinea pig for our leaders brief, and thank you for being so flexible and understanding, and also being, you know, being really responsive to the questions. So great questions from delegates. For again, thanks everyone for participating. If you've got any kind of future themes that you would like us to cover off, I think as we move forward, do let us know. So again, through the chat or through our inquiry box, and obviously with Lisa and the team. And we just to announce, we do have so Dr. Emma Philpott, who is obviously the CEO of the IASME Consortium. So she will be in our June session. So we're just confirming the date with Emma, but you know, she obviously runs things like Cyber Essentials and Cyber Essentials Plus, etc. So that would be a really interesting conversation. So again, any things people would like in the future, do let us know, and but really look forward to those next sessions. But again, thank you so much, Phil, for your time, and again, well done for the great work I know you're doing at UE in Bristol. So excellent.
Thank you, Simon. It's been a pleasure to chat with everyone today, and thank you very much for having me here. And keep up the great work with the UK Cybersecurity Council.
Thanks a lot, Phil. Cheers. Take care. All the best.
Cheers. Bye for now.
We'll stay online. Lisa, we'll see you back in a moment. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.